We saw from the introductions. I am Missy Madigan. I'm a 4th grade teacher here. We are all members of the Classical Co-op, which is why we're here doing this.
Sarah Seal, 12th grade Humanities, 10th grade Rhetoric, and also part of the Classical Co-op.
And Michelle Mills, kindergarten, also part of the Classical Co-op.
So we get a good spectrum of ideas here. So the general overview of what we'll talk about in our session today is classical education. What is it? How does it look at Eagle Ridge? Talk a little bit about the Andrew Kern visit that we recently had visits, I should say. The Norms and Nobility book study, and then classical training for staff members and what that looks like and what are the next steps with that.
To review the mission and vision of the school, because that is really why we're all here, at least partially. The mission of Eagle Ridge Academy is to provide students with a traditional classical education that demands their best in academic achievement, behavior, and attitude, and challenges them to attain their highest potential. And the vision, especially as we think about what we are preparing them for and what we want them to look like upon their departure at Eagle Ridge, is to offer them an academically rigorous classical education that prepares them to be exemplary and knowledgeable citizens, instills a lifelong passion for learning, teaches self-discipline, respect, perseverance, truth, beauty, and goodness, and foster the unique appreciation for the United States and her role in the world. Which is why we always have a Veterans Day performance that'll be coming up on Monday with our orchestra and choir and special speakers. So that is one thing I really appreciate about being here at Eagle Ridge, is getting a chance to do that.
It's done in a very honorable way.
Eagle Ridge Academy has a pillar program. We have, the initials are CIPHER, C for citizenship, integrity, I, perseverance, P, honor, excellence, and respect. These pillars are practiced every day. It's integrated actually into all the subjects, whether they're in the classroom or outside the classroom, in the lunchroom, on the playground. There's a formal program this year that was developed. Missy was one of the authors of the program. And we have these posters now in the classroom that also we can win, the classroom can win or achieve a feather from the eagle. And once they have all of those in there, they win some kind of a reward, some kind of prize of some sort. And they're working really hard on that.
It is kind of a full program, so it's the feathers, it's the eagle that travels. Can I use you as an example? It's the stickers. Miss Abby in my class had a pillar sticker for today. What did you get it for? Which one? Excellent. She always gets the really good ones. Kids love those kind of things. It's not, here's a piece of candy because you did a good job. It's, here's some pride. Here's some pride in your work, and they really, really thrive on that. And we've earned our reward with our feathers twice already. We're 2 feathers away from the next one. So it's cool to see it trickle down to all of the kids. Okay. The Classical Co-op is the group of staff that is it's comprised of administration, teachers from the School of Grammar, Logic, and Rhetoric, and then non-teaching staff. So we take into account all of the stakeholders that are there to develop and continue our passion for classical education, to make sure that we keep the mission and vision at the core of what we do. So you'll see that you'll get the mission and vision every single presentation you see, because that truly is who we are, and a continued effort is definitely there with the Classical Co-op. We do meet monthly and talk about different avenues that we can pursue as far as training and maintaining that passion for classical education.
Dorothy Sayers, the 19th century writer and language expert, also known for The Lost Tools of Learning, has a quote that really resonates with us in the Classical Co-op in Eagle Ridge. We, society as a whole, have succeeded in teaching our students subjects, but we have failed overall in teaching them how to think. So one of the larger goals and aims that we're trying to do is ennoble students to be able to think for themselves, as opposed to just teaching them math or reading or science. To have those transferable problem solving and critical thinking skills that will help them be successful in whatever fields they choose to pursue after high school and elementary school and middle school.
So the structure of the school, of the classical school, is the trivium. And there are 3 schools: the School of Grammar, K through 5, the School of Logic, 6 through 8, and the School of Rhetoric, which is 9 through 12. And we'll get into more of that in the next slide. So grades 5, K through 5, they learn the anatomy of the subjects, embedding the facts and how things work right through direct instruction and modeling. There's a lot of modeling, a lot of direct instruction in the younger grades for a reason. It's called the School of Grammar, so they have to be given the knowledge, given the facts, those kinds of things. And we do that through that way, through direct instruction and modeling. And they're using their natural ability for memorizing. It's strongly and positively utilized. There's a lot of things that they have to memorize, some things that we would like them to memorize, and which is good for, it's a good tool for the mind. Implementing by chants and songs and stories and whole group recitation, oral presentations, guided practice. All these are used to build a solid foundation on which they build later into the next school.
So the whole message of the grammar school, the whole point of that is to build all of these different facts so that once they get to the logic stage, they can then make those connections from one fact to another and make those connections. So within the School of Logic, which would be grades 6 through 8, it's connecting those facts through logical reasoning, thinking about, well, why is this the same? Thinking about that, going through some dialectic questioning, so having the teacher guide students, either one-on-one or as a whole, to a larger understanding or a deeper understanding of what they're really learning there. Using their natural inclination to argue for good educational purposes. They do it. They know how to do it. We just need to teach them how to do it well. And then implementing cause and effect as well as argument in both their writing and their discussions to discover those larger ideas that are there.
As they progress through the 3 schools, they arrive at the School of Rhetoric, grades 9 through 12. This is where we really focus on helping students be able to defend a perspective and belief, and the primary mode we do that is through Socratic discussion on classical texts. We implement logic, kind of go back to the School of Logic in some ways as they have come up with answers to the why, to really continue to have them work in articulating the why and the logic, the facts and information supporting those arguments, and using their natural inclination to persuade, which I'm sure if you have students in the School of Rhetoric, you get at home often, to try to improve those skills as well as teach them how to express themselves and convince people of purposes or arguments, both in oral and written expression, and really trying to continue to work with them on communicating with eloquence, creativity, and clarity, which seems to be an art that isn't necessarily valued in our society as a whole. So really trying to work with them, and that is one thing I can say with students returning from college and visiting and saying that they are much more well-spoken than their peers and have received really very high grades for participation in college courses, partially as a result of what they have taken away from Eagle Ridge.
Andrew Kern is a consultant from CiRCE Institute and co-author of a classical education called The Movement Sweeping the Nation. And he was here providing training back in May for the board of directors and the classical co-op. And he also did an additional training in August for our back to school seminar for the teachers. And October, we just had another one with him as well. And he did an overall, overarching idea of classical education, and he used a mimetic lesson, which is new to us too. He also provided training for parents in October. Some of you may have been there. Have anyone from this group been to that training? And if you haven't, then it's also on, the footage is available under the classical education tab on the website, on the school website. It's about 3 hours long, but it's broken up into different sections, so we heard it was very good.
Part of what he had presented during that time was the mimetic lesson. The purpose would be to lead the student to new understanding of an idea and perceptions of truth by contemplating types of the idea. And types can be examples, they can be connections to other things that they've already done. So the principles would be to move from the particular model to the universal idea. So take connected to math right now, taking the idea of an algorithm but knowing how to transfer that into a word problem or in a real life situation. You can know how to how to find the average, but if you don't know when to find the average, it's not really a great skill to have. Move from the known to the unknown, connecting it to what they know, and then learning actively and attentively, so even if the teacher isn't speaking directly to them, they still need to follow that larger conversation. Absorption and reflection. Must alternate like breathing, so realizing what they're doing, taking in some information, thinking about that, taking in more information, connecting those dots again. And then learning is an imitation of artifacts, art, and ideas.
And to kind of briefly give an overview of the stages of this lesson, the first part would be to prepare the students for the logos, for that universal truth or the goal in mind that we have for them, and raising their awareness of what they already know about that topic. So, for example, when we did World War I with the seniors recently, I borrowed Mr. Clapero's World War I PowerPoint from 8th grade and spent about 10 minutes, 15 minutes going back and saying, what do you remember? What have you already learned about World War I? Since now they cycle back around in the sequence to that. And it was amazing to them how much they actually remembered if they had that visual cue. So the map of Europe, or seeing the picture of some of the figures, and saying the name, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, they said, oh yeah, and this is what happened, and here's the person who assassinated him, and how much they really brought up to then be able to present the types and particulars of World War I, to then move on to comparing World War I to previous wars and conflicts that they've studied in other classes, and comparing and contrasting, well, how is World War I different from the Civil War and Revolutionary War that you covered last year? And then moving to the expression of the logos, or the universal, by either definition, generalization, and expression of the truth learned. And as they move to the stage of embodiment with the application and implementation, this is really important for the students to express it in their own words and kind of then embody and live out whatever the purpose was. And mimetic instruction isn't something that we use necessarily in every class and every subject every day. It has its places where it really has the ability to impact student learning positively, and it really is rooted in the idea that humans learn by moving from the particular, specific concrete things to the universal. So general abstract terms, how can we take this particular situation or mathematical concept and then apply it to a larger math principle, or those real life scenarios, as Missy was saying, with finding an average.
So Norms and Nobility is a book. It's called A Treatise on Education. It was written by David Hicks, which the co-op did a book study. We just are finishing that now. We broke up into small groups. We did the whole book over a course of several weeks and came through and together and did discussions on each chapter. In a larger group meeting, we're going to discuss that text, or they did it already over the break. I was not here, it was over the fall break. But whoever was here in town did meet, and Missy, you were one of them. Were you, Sarah? Sarah was also one that met during the fall break and had a nice discussion over coffee that day. And the board of directors will next be doing the study, and they'll be doing that about in January time frame. And it's just another lens for us to look at the richness of classical education, because classical education can be many different things to many different people. And so we're just taking it, pieces of it, putting it together to see what Eagle Ridge Academy wants it to be.
We are doing some classical training for staff, so this would be the objectives and then the required reading for Classical 101. All staff are required to have the opportunity and get the opportunity to participate in that. There are 2 sessions that are going on right now that are just about to the end. So the objectives would be to have an understanding of the major texts in classical education, to engage in thoughtful dialogue about classical education. The feedback that we've gotten is that is the most valuable part of it so far. And then advance their critical and thinking skills. So realize what we already know, and again, through my medic, connecting it to things that are new to us. These are some of the articles that we use. It is by no means all inclusive of the articles that are out there or the vast knowledge of classical education that is out there, but it's a little snippet of what we've been working on so far. The next step of that will be to do Classical 201, and is it 201 or 102? I was 201. So that will be the next step. So take 101 first and then take 201. And that's going to be more this is more big picture, and the next one will be more specific strategies and tools that they can use.
And having the opportunity in that next class then to break into the School of Grammar, specifically the School of Logic and the School of Rhetoric, instructional strategies and techniques that apply and kind of fit in with the methodology of those schools, as well as building up the pillars of classical education from the foundation that we are working on with this philosophical overview and kind of history of where did classical education originate, how has it been reincarnated or rejuvenated throughout different periods in history, because once we understand that, then we can build upon it, knowing where it has been and what's been successful and which elements of classical education have really permeated all the reincarnations versus us knowing that we don't have students stand on a small pillar in the middle of the cafeteria and recite orations like they did in the classical world, but still continuing to work on the oratory skills in a more realistic and life setting. Classical education as a journey. Andrew Curran likes journey too, so if you have watched the video or you do, journeys and weaving, those are his 2 big things. Incorporating a classical culture, especially in light of where contemporary society is today, is an arduous, long journey. In many ways, some of the things that we are doing here are at odds with contemporary culture or certain elements of that. And so trying to be the best classical school we can be is a journey that we believe is worthy and worth continuing to strive towards being really the best classical school that we can be, and taking time to look at the philosophical background and big picture idea of classical education, which Andrew Curran was able to help us give us more tools to look at, is just one step on our journey to continue to grow as a classical school. So by all means, we don't feel like our journey is complete and we've reached the top of the mountain and now we just need to maintain. We are still striving to continue to model lifelong learning as an institution to hopefully inspire our students to do the same. Some of our next steps that we are doing to continue this would be to train all stakeholders in classical education. So thank you for being here tonight and being interested in learning what we're doing in helping train students, staff members, administration, and really all stakeholders, and working on adapting and implementing elements of classical education to provide additional tools and strategies to teachers to teach in the classical methodology.
Wait, that's the last one. We do have some time for question and answer, so if you have anything that you'd like to know either from previous presentations or this one, by all means. We can either answer them or we can take them back to the larger group.
This is a quiet group.
That good.
You'll think of that when you leave.
I have a question. The stakeholders, are the students considered stakeholders? And this just comes to mind because I don't know that I've actually sat down. I think they sort of get it, but I don't think they understand that they're in a classical education situation and what that means.
They do
Is
have
that, I mean,
Yeah. They have aha moments. So we just started our expository writing, and their topic that I gave them was choose 3 people, places, or events from the American Revolution. And one of our students says, "Wait, we're learning about that in history." It's like, yes, you are. Yes, you are. This is classical education. We kind of had a discussion about that everything is connected. The things we do in Latin are directly related to what we do in math. Decade, decimal, century. Those are all Latin roots. So they're starting to see those connections. I myself would consider them a stakeholder for sure, because they're here. And we need to work, the school staff, parents and students need to work together as a little trio to make sure that no holes are within that system. That would be age appropriate training, of course.
well, yeah, and that's where I come in, because I can see, my son sort of has elements of it,
Right.
but I don't think I've actually sat down and said, this is why this school is different from where you've been going. And I know with my older daughter, I've explained it, and she gets it more and more every year, but, okay.
It's that
I'm just
implementation of wisdom and virtue. So not just do you know how to do this, but what's the truth, the beauty, and the goodness behind that? How can we do that in a way that's going to help us become an exemplary, knowledgeable citizen? And connecting those parts, we do it a lot during the school day. I think they're making those connections and they're getting to that point, but like I said, on an age appropriate.
And it's a journey, again, process.
And I think when you get into the upper grades, some of the seminar discussions are a great way to start talking about that virtue and the morality and making judgments. And in 9th grade, they're talking about justice and honor, and what is honor, how do we define honor, what are the key components, what did that look like in the classical world, and how does that translate? Is honor the same, or if it's different, why is it different, and should it be different? So they do get into some of those discussions, and if they have peers that have been at other schools, even for high school, those are also really enlightening moments to say that, okay, I left because I wasn't sure if this school was for me for a month or less, and came back and said, in the other school, I did packets. It was worksheets. The teacher said, here is your packet, here is your book, you go, you do. If you have questions, I'm here at my desk. And what they're getting here, and that connection and the relationships that they're building with each other and with their teachers, I think as they progress, they start to realize some of the benefits of what they have. But if they've been here all along, sometimes I think they don't realize that what they're doing is so unique compared to what else is out there.
That's what I was gonna say, because I have older kids. I have 2 that are in high school, and so obviously they had elementary school at a kind of traditional public school, a different setting, and so they get it. I mean, they got it right away in 6th grade. It's totally different from what we did in 5th grade, and it's totally different from what my friends that are going to the local junior high are doing, and now they're in high school and they're very much involved in Socratic discussions, and so they understand that. Could they define what classical education is? Probably not, but they know what the difference is. And then I have a 2nd grader who's been here, kindergarten for a second, and planning for him to graduate from here. And when he graduates, well, he won't know the difference because he will never have experienced anything other than the classical education, which is a good thing, but it's kind of like, I think my older kids have an appreciation for, this is why we're at Eagle Ridge.
He will eventually get it. I mean, it's Eagle Ridge.
When he goes to
the real
college,
world.
yeah.
They'll see it. I didn't go to a school that was classical education, but it was very classical based. And I didn't realize it until college. I got there and it was like, that's it. That's what we're gonna do today. All right, let's get it done. And I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. And yeah, so it's a larger picture thing. You have to see what you have before it's gone.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry to my group because I keep blabbing. Apparently I don't get enough interaction during the day. So I'm first and 3rd grader, and as my 3rd grader was sitting at our gymnastics class doing his homework with his pencil and paper, another young man who was also in 3rd grade in Minnetonka schools was doing his homework on an iPad. And I'm just wondering, traditional schools have now is different than Eagle Ridge, and I don't have a problem with it at all. But the parent asked me, because I was explaining where he goes and that it's a classical education, and she said, is technology not part of the classical education? And I really didn't know how to answer that question. I didn't know, I mean, is it not? I mean,
To a
I don't
certain
expect
extent
kids,
it
we
is.
have iPads, we have one set of iPads for the entire school where lots of elementary kids are giving kids iPads to take home with them.
It depends on how that technology is used. If it's used in place of that conversation or that direct instruction, we're not at this point willing to compromise that. My class uses the iPads every Tuesday and Thursday except for this week because somebody else got them. For WordlyWise, and they started their WordlyWise, and honestly the scores this year have been far better than they have been in the past because we have those conversations. When would you use this word? In what form would you use this word? And looking at some different stories that use a lot of those words and connecting that to what they've done and questioning each other and how all of that works. So as long as it doesn't compromise that discussion and that dialogue that we have, I say go for it. I mean, we have projectors and all of this good stuff.
And
We don't put
technology is
iPads in.
valuable, don't get us wrong, technology is very valuable, it's just how do we use it? Whereas, I just went to the polls the other day for my own district. Are we gonna, raise the taxes for referendum so everyone gets an iPad? Well, I don't know the results of that yet, but, is it really necessary? Is it really
No,
necessary? So we look at that.
I asked that question too, because I do, I think I look at these young kids with iPads and I see this boy doing his homework on an iPad and my son trying to print his out, there's something to be learned with handwriting as
Fine
well.
motor skills.
So it's just, I didn't know how to answer her question and I'm like, well, I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I would say it depends on the purpose, and then,
Well, if you look at, you have an iPad, if we can have all our classical literature books on an iPad that's all accessible for a student, what's wrong with that, right? But as long as it doesn't take the place of the instructor, that's really okay. So, yeah, so there's definitely time and a place for it.
and it depends on the value of it. So if you think it's going to be this quick fix, give everybody an iPad and now we're an amazing school, it's not. It's not a miracle pill. But using it for its correct purpose or its intended purpose can be very beneficial, and we do that.
Agree.
And my class will be using it this tomorrow, actually. We're doing some phonics and some math games on there, just for enrichment, but it would never take the place of the whole instruction.
iPad and technology, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I wrote about that in my blog this last week. That it's, so check it out there's a little bit about it, but yeah, it's not, there's no intent to take the place of the teacher. Teachers to use that as an instructional tool to help extend the learning, not to replace the learning that would come from the teacher.
Okay, anything else? Great questions, I'm just writing them down. so.
Thank you so much for coming.
You are going next to, you are the red group. Oh, jeez. You are going to Mr. Aldrich in the Academy Commons for academic performance. I'm just writing up every question.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe you want to incorporate it into the next steps.
I have coffee, so I'm like trying to fish a little bit of a
Jump, jump,
lifesaver.
jump.
Taking the coffee and paid out. But I didn't have time to finish it, so it's stuck in my pocket.
You just gotta sneak it in.
How do I have to get this to be full without doing?